No, you bigots.
Now the world don't move to the beat of just one drum.
Oh boy, here I go pissing off as many people as possible again. Alright, what's Dakota here to bitch about today? Well, not really bitching so much as teaching. Yep, the honky about to mansplain to the masses some shit they should already know. And this video is going to be so unpalatable. Alright, so let me make one thing perfectly clear. Representation matters. But not in the way people claim it does, and not for the reasons people claim it does. Much like the wage gap, the value of representation is entirely made up. Yep, it's a complete falsehood. However, it is part of the reality we live in, sort of a component of the zeitgeist right now. Of course, if you've watched this channel before, you know that I'm all about gaming, but I also like movies and just storytelling in general, and this video is about representation in all of media, and why it's such a joke at this point. Modern entertainment media has been trying real hard to push for an increase in the visibility of certain lesser seen identities or human traits, I suppose. It's all very strange, though. There's a push to disproportionately overrepresent minority groups in situations where it doesn't make any sense to. Like I said in my last video, it often seems to stem from this desire some people have to see someone who looks like themselves on screen, which, while innocent sounding at first, you dig a little deeper only to find that a lot of these people just can't relate to or identify with a character who doesn't share their gender, sexual orientation, or skin color, or rather, in most cases, just can't relate to a character who is white and male. Now, if you can't connect with a character like Victor Vector in Cyberpunk because he's a white man, I'm gonna need you to find a hole and sit in that hole until the sun burns out. Your only value to the world at that point really is fertilizer, so be gone with you. These mofos are actually trying to force artists to race change characters for literally no other reason than ticking a box, or forcing gay relationships into stories that don't require any sort of romantic subplot or even a reference to a character's sexual orientation. What they don't seem to realize, though, is that this sort of inorganic, synthesized representation isn't true representation and only serves to further reinforce or create damaging stereotypes. It's like if a white person writes a period piece about a settler in early America who didn't hate the natives. People would instantly call it propaganda. Now, there's people today who refer to Law and Order as copaganda, and I genuinely have to wonder if these people can chew gum and walk upright at the same time. I also want to mention, as a bit of an aside here, that race-swapping existing characters tends to be bad form in general, at least when it's done just to tick a box. No one actually cares that Director Fury was white in the comics, but they cast Sam Jackson to play him in the movies. There's a few reasons for this, but one is that they didn't advertise it like they were some revolutionary role models for doing it. What it comes down to is that he's excellent in the role, and his personality isn't heavily altered to center around his skin color or other immutable traits. Jackson just brings a certain life to the character that is unique to him, and I think works very well in that adaptation. And it's not like they even brought him on for marquee value, because no one even knew he was in the original Iron Man movie prior to going into the theater. This is what hiring based on merit looks like. Or hell, maybe someone involved in casting was just a big fan of Sam Jackson and wanted to work with him. Which I blame him? But let's look at race swapping for the sake of it, such as casting a black actress to play Ariel in The Little Mermaid live-action remake. It's not like they were retelling the story as if it took place off the coast of Cape Town. It's just Little Mermaid, but with a black woman to cause controversy and try to sell more tickets. And look, I'm not trying to say it's a worse film because she's black. I'm saying it's a worse film because she's being exploited for being black. And maybe not everyone will see it that way, probably not even the actress herself, since I'm sure she got paid very well for the role. But eventually, if I were getting hired just for my skin color, I'd start to wonder if people actually cared about my skill sets, if I had any value to them based on things that I actually have control over. In fact, I started to feel this way with certain places I've worked. Because I didn't share certain values or possess certain traits that were kind of more celebrated, it seems like I was less valued as a person in like the social dynamic of those workplaces. I put in more work than most as well, and brought a level of skill that made others uncomfortable to have to be compared to me. Literally double the work in a lot of cases. And they made me very acutely aware of these discomforts. I personally don't want to be given the world simply because I exist, nor have it taken away just because I exist. I want to actually earn the laurels I'm given. And this is true in terms of this channel as well. I don't want people coming here just because I'm a white guy criticizing anti-white culture trends, but because I bring value to the discourse and make interesting videos in a unique way. Now, back to the topic of race swapping, what really frustrates me overall is the double standard about it. I think we can all agree that whitewashing can be a huge problem at times. So why isn't blackwashing seen the same way? Like, do you think anyone would go see a new Blade movie if he was played by Tom Holland? Hell, does anyone truly believe Tom Holland would even accept a role like that? So why is it okay to exploit black people to capitalize on social trends? Isn't that worse? In a world where we ignored race as part of a person's character or didn't treat it as a dividing line, race swapping wouldn't be a problem. And that's just it. I don't actually care if a character is race swapped because race doesn't matter unless the story is specifically about it. Like, of course, a movie about Robert E. Lee wouldn't make a lot of sense if they cast a black person to play him. But even still, there's potential for comedy if you were to make some type of parody film where you did race swap him, and I bet it could be hilarious if it were done in good fun. Trying to send a message can also be okay, but a lot of people just don't want to be preached to, especially by undereducated film school students who know nothing about the real world, or rich elites who are so out of touch they should have their central nervous systems repossessed. The irony of all of this is that there is a type of representation that matters. And it's the representation individuals have for groups that they belong to. You see, humans are naturally pattern-seeking creatures with a tendency to generalize. It's not inherently a bad thing, and it does stem from a survival instinct. So let me offer an example. I play airsoft, well, when I'm not being lazy. Airsoft is a bit of a dodgy hobby in the eyes of the average non-airsoft player. Most events are MILSIM, short for military simulation, and utilize extremely convincing replicas of real firearms. In fact, my primary firearm has its design officially approved by the manufacturers of the real-world variant. This is basically LARPing for dudes who didn't want to join the military. As a result, government stiffs and anti-gun loonies are always trying to restrict the sport more and more. It's at its worst, though, when some chode does something really stupid, like shooting a neighborhood stray or full auto spraying a 10-year-old that isn't currently engaged in a game. Doesn't happen super often, but it's always bad when it does. What I quickly realized upon getting into this hobby is that everything I do, regardless of where or when I do it, may end up being associated with airsoft if the people who see me do something know that it's something I enjoy. I'm basically an ambassador for the sport against my will. It's sort of like when you hear about a restaurant that's decided to stop doing Bring Your Monkey Night because an 8-year-old got bitten. At first you're like sort of confused by how strange and specific that is. But then you find out the restaurant is in Florida, and suddenly it all makes sense. Associations exist naturally, and how valid these associations are does tend to vary. Obviously, they tend to end up being negligible, but patterns are formed for good reason. Moist Critical might be a Florida man, but he's not standing on a Wendy's in his underwear yelling at strangers for 4 hours straight. So when a bunch of people with blue hair and pronouns in their bios start forcing a bunch of irrelevant modern shit into stories where it doesn't belong, they are ironically proving that representation matters, but not in the way they claim. Ultimately, it just makes any groups they're associated with look so much worse. And funny enough, many of them helpfully list off these groups in their bios on Twitter to expedite the formation of tons of new prejudices. It's kind of shocking how none of them have managed to notice how much they're hurting their own causes. Now, because like people in those groups now who are actually capable of critical thinking, yeah, they exist, such as Finding Sky, are distancing themselves from being associated with certain things in the culture they're a part of. And we're starting to see just how much of this stuff has gotten out of control due to people co-opting and corrupting what was otherwise a perfectly valid and meaningful movement. It happened to feminism and the Democratic Party back in 2016, and it's only spreading at this point. We do have to be careful about how we view people in groups like this, because on the one hand, participating in airsoft is a choice I made willingly, but people who are gay or Asian or even white didn't choose to be those things, so associating them with an entire group doesn't make sense. But when you have bad actors who are misrepresenting those groups, it's going to cause more problems. Now, like I said in my last video, the reason you see unhinged comments from people merely because a woman or non-white person is on screen is because people like Alyssa Mercante, the psychos at Sweet Baby Inc. and so forth, have further damaged the image of people who were already struggling to be involved in Western culture. Morgan Freeman said years ago that we should stop talking about race, and for a while we largely did. Now we're talking about it more than ever, and the divide has gotten worse. So no, the number of black, Hispanic, gay, trans, poly, dick girls in media doesn't actually matter. What matters is how people treat others and how conscious people are of the associations people will make. Once again, lead by example rather than holding people at gunpoint and forcing them to follow your ideals that you made up in front of the mirror 20 minutes ago. So I say to all people who want to burn it all down and think they know better than all of the people who came before them, you are your own movement's worst enemy. You make me an op, and then you get treated like one in return. Do I hate all these movements? No, but I will happily fight Alyssa Mercante if the offer is still on the table. I'm serious. Bring it, you sheltered wretch, languishing in your orgy of simple-minded yes-men, too scared to call out your complete lack of compassion and the gaping hole in your character left by its absence. You are the Lord of Ring Gollum of people, the Emperor's new clothes of activism, the new Anita Sarkeesian if she was completely unsmashable. And I am the good hunter, hell-bent on ending the scourge of beasts like you. See, I could be super hurtful and never use a forbidden word. AI censors be damned. Thank you all so much for watching, and you know what? Keep watching my videos, because I'm cool and funny and hilarious and original.
Woo.